Two, I wanted to look a little bit at a specific factor or space within editing. I've seen a lot of great work with track changes, which I'll look at in my document in a moment. But a bigger part that I need to see that creates this conversation are the comments about why you're making the changes you're making. So I think right now is a really good space for that to discuss it because we're looking at macro versus micro editing. And when we read the information about the assignment, we see this idea of working with the editor and having a conversation. And I think that that is the space I want you to be thinking about, that it's a conversation, that it's a dialogue. And even with our own selves, life comes at us fast. We're going to forget why exactly we made a particular edit. So the same way that in our assignment here, we're going to make multiple copies, I encourage you to do that overall with your writing point blank, period, because you need to be able to see the trajectory. You need to be able to see what sort of changes you've made and assess those changes and ask yourself like why you're doing that. And if you don't save these copies, you're not going to be able to see how your writing is growing and changing. And you're also not going to be able to go backwards if you end up deciding that you liked what you originally had. So keep up with that stuff. Keep up with making copies so that you can see those things. I often save as drafts, so I'll make a duplicate and then I'll save as, whatever day or month I'm working on that particular draft. So the next thing I want to look at, that was making those copies for yourself, being cognizant that this is a conversation and conversations need to have some sort of record or we need to keep track of them. B, let's look at this part. How do we do that? So we're going to select track changes, but we're also going to add comments. And I'm not sure that everyone is familiar with ways to do that. So there are two ways to add those comments. One, we can click on the button that adds a comment, and I'll show you what that looks like. But we can also type it into the field by putting it like in parentheses, and then we can have sort of a conversation going. So there are two ways to do that, and I'm going to show you what they look like. But specifically when we're looking at part one here, where we're looking at macro edits, we're looking at revisions, we're saying, what do I think about my organization, about my structure, about these larger concerns? And that's especially where I need you to share why you're doing that. I need in the margins of your draft for each of your edited changes explaining why you've made that revision edit. That is going to be a key element because that's where our conversation and dialogue starts. Notice that it doesn't specify that down here under the micro edits because that's where we're saying like, well, maybe I want it to be side instead of said, or, I'm changing really minute small things, in which case we may not want to have those. But again, even though it's not specifically here in part two, I encourage you to sort of share what you're thinking. Why do you like one word over another? What's drawing you to a particular idea? So what this is telling us is make two copies. We're going to have our original, and then we're going to have a copy where we approach something larger, where we revise. Revision is about content. And then we're going to edit. Editing is about grammar. It's about parentheses and all the silly little things that really can make or break a work, but that are very, very small and detailed. So we're not looking at character development down here. Instead, we're looking at, do I want that part of the dialogue to be on a new line or to be part of a paragraph? We're looking at really specific grammatical and spelling questions. So let's go look at a document. You may find that mine is a little bit different because I'm using Pages for Mac, but some of the same ideas are still there. So first off, what I did is that I went and I turned on track changes. So as you can see, it's letting me turn it off if I want, but I already have that enabled. And then I didn't have a creative writing piece, so I grabbed one from some work I've done in the past so it's nonfiction that we're writing here. So I had looked for an area where I could have some notes. Notice that we have a lot of things that Word is, or Pages in this case, is offering me. They are showing me that they don't like spelling sections in here, and there are specific reasons for why I have certain words like authorship that is different than authorship, and so I'm putting that in there, and it's saying like, hey, that's not how you spell a word. And then I have choices, like I can sometimes add those words, or I can decide sort of what that looks like. But you'll see that sometimes what Word is wanting us to do, or the support it's giving us, is not ideal. So I'm not changing that because I'm right. I'm using a word that's not very typical, so I need that space within it. So down here, I made a note to myself right here. I added a comment. So notice up here, when I'm looking at these like comments and changes, I have the option to add a comment or the option to highlight an area. I can also just go in and change what I'm typing. So here I highlighted that word and I made a comment. And then that comment helps me know what I want to do later for some changes. Like I decided that that needs a full paragraph, that I'm not really exploring it as well as I want. And then over here, I was looking at the word events and I was like, oh, so I'm going to highlight it because I think that's a nice way to show. But rather than changing that word right now, I'm not sure what word I want. I haven't decided that yet, but I'm in this process of editing and I've looked at it and I've said, self, I don't like that. I feel like it should be different. So I could make a comment. So I could come up here and I could click on comment and I could add that comment. But what I decided to do instead is write a little note to myself. So in parentheses, I put word choice. I don't like that I use the word event. I think it should be something else, but I haven't decided what the something else is, and I need to think about that and process it and see sort of how it fits into the larger work itself. So I put myself a note right here. So those are two things you can do for me and for you. Like, yes, you're doing assignments for me because you're turning it into me and you're getting my feedback, but most importantly, I want you to be thinking about your future self. Will you remember why you made a change next week? I personally will not. Like life is fast, it's busy. I'm not going to remember that. So I'm leaving myself clues. I'm leaving myself breadcrumbs about what I'm thinking and why I'm processing. Because what if I come back to this a weekend I say, oh, you know what, self, I think events is the right word. I think you got it. I can delete that note. I can delete that sort of edit here of word choice and I can go on about my life. So that's what you're going to do for us and for yourself because you want to create these steps. And again, I'm giving you two sort of different ways to do this because I want you to think about what works for you. What makes sense for you, what is straightforward, simple, just really comfortable for you, and what feels really odd. I want you to pick the one that's comfortable for you because I want you to do this for yourself. So I can come in here and I can highlight something and I can make a comment about what I want to do with it, where I want to go with it, or why I've made a specific change. Or B, I can come in here and I can actually just type it in parentheses. So I haven't made that change, but I've made a note of word choice, and I could put it as a question to myself. And then if I wanted to make, let's see, I'm trying to think of changes I could make right now. But if we're going to make some changes in here, we can do the same thing. So if I took that away, I could leave a note to myself. I'm adding a comment here, removed barriers to trial new system to show students. So I haven't actually done anything there, it's not that great, but I left a note to myself because I want to know why I've removed something, why I've changed it. That perhaps, I'm leaving the spelling difference for a specific reason. So that's what I want you to be thinking about this time, that within this space of considering 1 to 2 macro edits and 1 to 2 micro edits, that it's not just about those edits, it's about the conversation, the dialogue of why you're making those changes. And that's not just for me, obviously it's for me for the assignment, but more than that, it's for your own self, so that later you can continue that conversation or you can figure out what you want to do with it. If you have any issues with the physicality of this, of figuring out what spaces those are, please do not hesitate to send me an email with what your program is. So are you using Google Docs, or using Word, or using Pages? And then I can find supports that will show you what steps to take and where to click for your particular program. So I look forward to seeing not just those changes, but why you're making them so that we can have that conversation.